Growing up, I never really liked going to school. I think it was because I wasn't very good at it. I didn't like to do homework or study or things like that. And I never did well like in science or math. And when it came to English and grammar, I think I learned more about those subjects watching Schoolhouse Rock on Saturday morning TV than I did at school. But at an early age, I really enjoyed learning about history. But it wasn't until I got to junior high at Luther Jackson that my passion for learning about history really grew. And that was because of my 7th grade history class and my teacher, Miss Grossman. I don't know what she did, but she lit a fire under me to really want to learn all about history. Now, I had a small basis of U.S. history, but she was the one that got me really interested in all types of history, and especially world history. She showed us a movie called Nightmare in Red, and it was about the Russian Revolution. And I was mesmerized by that movie. I don't know what it was, but it really made me want to learn more about that subject and about all types of world history. So as I left Luther Jackson and got to Oakton High School, I was still a pretty good student in history, but I was pretty much mediocre in everything else. In fact, I was so mediocre that my typing teacher, after about 2 weeks, came up to me and said, "Bill, you really should be taking this class, pass, fail." So I did, and I passed. Now going into my junior year, 11th grade, they had a class that had never been offered before, and I don't think it's been offered since. It was European and Russian history. And I knew I really wanted to take that class, so I signed up for it. And it was going to be second period of my junior year. So the first day I walk into the room there, I look around, and here I am, Mr. Mediocre, Mr. Mediocrity, and everybody else in that room were the top students in a junior and senior class. Like, oh man. Now the class started out pretty slowly for me because I came to learn that when my teacher, Mr. Bigler, spoke, you needed to take notes. Now, this class was probably the closest thing to a college lecture class as you'll get in high school. And I remember that he's quite a dynamic lecturer, and he really spun the material into a story. And I thought about things like, that's what history is. History is a study of true life stories. And I remember occasionally he would actually play music with the lectures. That really enhanced it quite a bit, and the class really got together as almost like we were a team or something like that. Now, that soon, Mr. Bigler became Tsar Bigler, and we as students became his mujik, or his peasants. Now, the class wasn't just lectures. We also watched historic movies, and we did historic simulations, which historic simulations are a great way to learn history because you become part of the history. Now, when it came to the movies, they weren't just the educational movies, but they're motion pictures. And the 3 I remember the most. When we were learning about English history, we watched a movie called A Man for All Seasons, a movie about King Henry VIII and Thomas More. We also watched Nicholas and Alexandra about the last Tsar of Russia. But the movie I remember the most was Stanley Kubrick's Cold War classic, Dr. Strangelove. The reason I remember it so well is that Mr. Bigler censored the movie, part of it at least. There's a scene where they talk about the communist conspiracy of the fluoridation of water and precious bodily fluids. Well, when that scene came up, Mr. Bigler came and turned the sound down. We couldn't hear that. Now, so every time I see that movie now, my ears prick up because that was the part that was censored. And I've watched it many times, and I'm not really sure why it was censored at all. But I asked him a few years ago why, and he said, "Well, you can't hear everything." Don't know what that meant, but the one thing that happened in that class that I don't know if I'll ever live down was we did a historic simulation on the Cuban Missile Crisis. It started out by us watching a movie called The Missiles of October. after that, we split up into groups. We had a press group, and a Cuban group, Russian group, and an American group. I was in the American group. In fact, I was Pierre Salinger, the press secretary to President Kennedy. And my role was to read the press releases that our group wrote up. Now, the guy who was playing Kennedy, he thought he was the smartest in the class. So my first press release that I read, and it was written by all of us in the group, not me, but everybody in the group. And what the press release was that we made an accusation that there were missiles in Cuba, but we didn't have the proof. As soon as that happened, all hell broke loose. I mean, people were, how can you make an accusation without having any proof? So we basically lost it right there. And in the end, we ended up we ended up getting the missiles out of Cuba because we finally had the proof. But we had to, in return, we had to give up our base in Guantanamo. So you can see, not only was it a history lesson, but it's come full circle, because we're still talking about that to this day, about Guantanamo. And I really took a lot of heat from it, from Mr. Grella and from the rest of the class. Now, the funny thing is that I think he knew, but he still enjoyed, I think, giving me a hard time. In fact, for the rest of the year, half the time he called me Bill. The other half the time he called me Pierre. In fact, in my yearbook, it's signed to Pierre. It was just such a wonderful class, and I learned so much from it. Now, Mr. Bigelow and I have kept in touch over the years. He left Oakton right after that, my junior year, and he taught until just a few years ago when he finally retired. And in 1998, he was a National Teacher of the Year. So that's the kind of teacher that we had. That was my favorite class that I ever took, I think, in school. And then I really enjoyed, my time at Luther Jackson as well. And as I look back, both of those teachers were both very special to me. They, I don't use the general knowledge that they give me every day, but their love of teaching I've used each day in my life ever since I left those classes. I use it in everything that I do. And those teachers, those two teachers, are really special, because they took a kid, me, who didn't want to go to school, didn't want to study, didn't want to learn, and made me love going to school, love learning, and I thank him all the time. Thanks.